Every Friday after work, Naomi and her younger sister, Elise, made their way to a quaint little cafe tucked between a vintage florist and an old bookstore on Belmont Avenue. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, where the warm scent of ground espresso mingled with the sounds of steaming milk, quiet indie music, and the occasional laugh from behind a laptop screen. For Naomi, it was a weekly ritual. For Elise, it was a fragile sanctuary. Elise had always been the more delicate of the two. Sensitive, thoughtful, and easily overwhelmed by the chaos of the world, she often found refuge in books. On that particular afternoon, she was curled into the corner booth, half hidden behind a dragon-emblazoned fantasy novel, a steaming cup of vanilla chai cradled between her small hands. Naomi sat across from her, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, enjoying the rare moment of stillness. The peace was short-lived. The cafe door swung open with a shrill chime, and in walked a woman who radiated friction like static electricity. Her blonde bob was sculpted with military precision, her oversized sunglasses sat too low on her nose, and she clutched a designer handbag that screamed imitation. Her lips were pressed into a thin line of judgment even before she reached the counter. "Why is the music so depressing in here?" she snapped at the barista, her voice loud enough to cut through the gentle atmosphere. "Can't you put on something normal?" The barista, a soft-spoken college student named Jordan, offered a practiced, polite smile. "The playlist chosen by the owner," he replied with all the patience of someone used to customers like her. She muttered something unintelligible and placed her order, a large oat milk latte, in a tone that sounded more like a threat than a request. Naomi barely glanced up. People like that came and went in cafes, demanding, entitled, miserable beneath the gloss. Elise, as always, remained engrossed in her book, oblivious to the storm brewing nearby. But the woman, who they'd later learn was named Courtney, wasn't finished. Latte in hand, she began to stalk the cafe floor like a lioness in heels. Her eyes darted from table to table, flickering with disdain. And then they landed on Naomi and Elise. Naomi felt the stare before she saw it, a prickle at the back of her neck, the unmistakable pressure of someone trying to find fault. She looked up and locked eyes with Courtney, who was now glaring at Elise like she was a stain on fine upholstery. Courtney walked over slowly, her heels clicking ominously against the wood floor. She stopped beside their table and crossed her arms, latte still in hand. "What's wrong with her?" she asked loudly, not even bothering to address Naomi directly. "Her vibe is off." Elise looked up, startled, her book slipping slightly in her hands. "Excuse me," Naomi said, her voice rising, the protective instinct kicking in like a second heartbeat. Courtney leaned closer. "She's giving me weird energy. Is she okay? Mentally?" Naomi's jaw clenched. "She's reading. She's not bothering anyone." Courtney huffed, glancing around theatrically. "Well, maybe she shouldn't stare so much. It's creepy. Some of us are sensitive to that kind of energy." Before Naomi could say another word, two men at a nearby table stood up. They looked unassuming, jeans, plain shirts, middle-aged, but there was a stillness to their movements, a quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "I'm going to ask you to stop harassing these young women." Courtney blinked. "And who the hell are you?" He reached into his back pocket and flashed a badge. "Detective Marcus Hayes. Off duty, but still within jurisdiction." Courtney scoffed, the latte trembling slightly in her grip. "She was staring at me. She made me uncomfortable." The other man, Detective James Moretti, folded his arms and said, "So you decided to escalate the situation in public? That's not how discomfort is handled, ma'am." Courtney's face flushed. Her lips curled, and then, without warning, she threw the contents of her cup directly at Elise. It was a moment Naomi would replay in her mind 1,000 times. The arc of the hot latte. The scream. Elise jumping back, her hoodie instantly soaked, her neck already turning red. Naomi leapt from her seat, adrenaline surging as she reached for her sister. But the detectives moved faster. "That's assault," Hayes barked. "You're done." Courtney was still trying to hold on to her delusion. "It was just coffee. I have the right to defend my peace." "You just threw a hot beverage at a minor," Moretti said. "That's attempted bodily harm. You're under arrest." Gasps spread through the cafe. The barista stood frozen, mid-call with emergency services. Courtney, now wide-eyed, tried to backpedal literally and figuratively. "She kept staring at me," she cried. "She didn't even see you," Naomi shot back. Hayes produced handcuffs with practiced ease. "You need to sit down. Now." Courtney struggled, her voice cracking, but it was over. Within seconds, she was seated against the wall, wrists bound behind her back, muttering incoherently about energy and spiritual distress. Paramedics arrived minutes later. Elise's burns weren't life-threatening, but they were real, painful, red, angry. She declined hospital transport but accepted a cool compress and gentle reassurance. The detectives gave their statements. Witnesses, more than a dozen, volunteered to do the same. The cafe's security footage captured everything. Courtney was taken away still protesting. The cafe fell into silence. Later that evening, as Naomi helped Elise change out of her stained hoodie, she saw the raw pink of the burn on her sister's neck. It wasn't deep, but it was a wound all the same. "I didn't even look at her," Elise whispered later that night. "I know," Naomi said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She said my energy was wrong. She was wrong. 3 days later, Detective Hayes called. The district attorney's office was pressing charges: misdemeanor assault, attempted bodily harm, disturbing the peace. Courtney had posted bail but would be arraigned within the week. When Elise heard, she blinked. "They're actually doing something?" "They are," Naomi confirmed. "You matter. What she did matters." The courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. Elise sat beside Naomi, trembling slightly. The burn on her neck had faded, but her nerves hadn't. Courtney arrived looking pinched and pale. Her lawyer, an overconfident man in a shiny suit, offered a not guilty plea, but it unraveled fast. Detective Hayes testified first. Calm, precise. Then Moretti. Then Jordan the barista. Then other patrons. Each layer of truth pressed down on the defense like bricks. Elise took the stand last. She was nervous, but steady. "She accused me of bad energy," she said. "I didn't say a word to her. I was just reading." Courtney took the stand and turned the courtroom into a circus. She rambled about feeling spiritually threatened. She said the coffee wasn't that hot. The prosecution presented the medical report. The judge's face hardened. 2 days later, the verdict came. "Guilty," the judge said. Courtney was sentenced to 100 hours of community service, an anger management course, a $5,000 state fine, and a $2,500 restitution to Elise. "This court does not tolerate aggression disguised as entitlement," the judge concluded. "Nor will it excuse assault masked as discomfort." Outside, under a sky still pale with morning light, Elise looked at Naomi and smiled, a small, real, quiet smile. Justice didn't erase the pain, but it acknowledged it. And that, finally, was enough. As the weeks unfolded after the sentencing, life began to resemble something close to normal again. But it wasn't the kind of normal that erases what happened. It was a new kind of quiet. One that had been fought for, cried over, defended, and finally reclaimed. Elise began returning to the cafe. Not right away, and never alone at first. Naomi went with her those initial times, sitting across from her just as before, trying not to hover but always alert. The first time they stepped through the cafe's door after the trial, the barista Jordan looked up with immediate recognition. He gave a cautious smile, respectful, not pitying, and said, "Glad to see you two again." They took their usual booth by the window. Elise still brought her books, but Naomi noticed she held them differently now, not like a shield, but like something precious. Something she didn't need to hide behind anymore. Her confidence came back in slow, gentle waves. She began responding more when strangers made small talk. She joined Naomi on errands she once would have avoided. She even started attending her college's poetry club again, something she'd abandoned months ago when her anxiety got too loud. One evening, after a long walk around the neighborhood park, Elise paused at the edge of the duck pond. Naomi, a few paces behind, watched her sister as she crouched down to toss breadcrumbs into the water. A child nearby, maybe 6 or 7, asked Elise what book she was reading. She held it up with a soft smile, explaining it was a story about dragons and sisters who fight side by side. Naomi's heart swelled. Elise wasn't just healing. She was growing. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was choosing when and how to engage. On her terms. In her time. And Karen Mitchell? The last they heard, she had been assigned to a downtown shelter sorting clothing donations, and later transferred to a highway cleanup crew after complaints were filed about her attitude. Her once loud voice seemed to have finally met silence, the kind of silence that follows when the world stops tolerating your noise. One day, Naomi received a short email from Detective Hayes. "Just wanted to follow up. Case file officially closed. She's on probation, but no violations so far. Keep us posted if anything comes up. You both showed remarkable strength. Don't forget that." She read the message aloud to Elise, who nodded, her expression unreadable. She'll probably just go back to being awful to someone else, Elise murmured. But at least it won't be me. Naomi reached over and gently squeezed her hand. She lost the power to make you small. That's what matters. Summer came and passed in golden hours, slow, hot afternoons spent reading on the back porch, drinking iced tea, and arguing over which fantasy series had the better female lead. Elise eventually picked up her sketchpad again, something Naomi hadn't seen her touch in almost a year. She started drawing dragons, yes, but also people. Faces, scenes from that courtroom. A sketch of Detective Hayes with his calm eyes and folded arms. A rendering of the cafe booth with sunlight streaming in. Her art began to tell their story, not of trauma, but of endurance. Months later, the cafe added a mural to its back wall. The owner, a soft-spoken woman named Lila, commissioned local artists to create a piece reflecting community and resilience. Elise submitted one of her sketches anonymously. When it was revealed, Naomi recognized it instantly. Two girls sitting in a booth, one reading, one watching. Around them, faint outlines of other cafe patrons, coffee cups steaming, light streaming in through tall windows. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was honest. Real. A small brass plaque beneath it read, "Peace deserves protection." No one needed to know the full story. But for those who did, it meant everything. And so the world kept spinning. Elise didn't become someone different. She simply became more herself. Stronger not in spite of her softness, but because of it. As for Naomi, she found herself becoming more aware, more vigilant, but also more hopeful. Not every story ended like this. Not every victim found justice. But this time, someone had listened. The system had worked. And that meant something. One night, as they sat on their front porch watching the stars blink to life above the city skyline, Elise leaned her head against Naomi's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. Naomi exhaled slowly. "Sometimes. But not the part you'd expect." Elise turned to her, curious. "I don't think about the coffee, or the burn, or her face. I think about the moment you stood in court and told the truth. And the way everyone listened." Elise didn't respond right away. But she smiled. A real, warm smile. And that said more than any words ever could. Because in the end, healing isn't loud. It doesn't come with grand gestures or dramatic music. It comes in quiet moments, in gentle resilience, in the ability to exist freely and fully without fear. And that was the justice they carried forward, not in court documents or sentencing orders, but in every small decision to live, laugh, and read in peace. Not despite the world, but in defiance of it.